Hi, everybody. My name is Brittany. Hello. I'm a studio host with Etcher Lab. Today we have the wonderful Angela. She'll be doing a landscape painting for us today. If you guys have any questions, just make sure that you type it in all capital letters so that I can defer it from a comment. And if the question isn't really relevant to what Angela's doing at the moment, then I'll kind of just save it for the end because we do a Q&A at the end. That's pretty much it for my end. I'll be chiming in here and there during the demo to let you guys know a few things. But other than that, I'll let Angela take over.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be demoing here, and thank you, Etcher, for hosting this. We're gonna have fun today. I started out painting landscapes, and here I am 20 plus years later, still painting landscapes. I thought I'd show you a little bit of what I've been working on lately. These are some paintings I finished over the last few weeks. I've been very inspired by the by winter and the skies that we get. We get a lot of sunrises and sunsets on these short days of winter. And then I also love to reminisce. So this is a summer scene and beautiful skies in the summer too. I live in northern British Columbia, so I'm very inspired by my landscape and the seasons that we have. But I also like painting kind of abstractly. This is kind of an abstracted, to me, this reminds me of the river, but I don't know if you might see something different depending on where you're from. And that's something I love about painting the landscape is over the years, I've started to realize that I can share my own perspective. I don't have to just copy my reference photo. I can simplify like I have here to express a mood and emotion, to share how I feel about my landscape. And to me, I live in an area where my roots go very deep, and I love painting not just what I see, but what I feel. And so today I want to show you how I do that, because what I have noticed is that when I first started painting, I would have been very irritated. The me I am now would have been very irritated with the artist I was then, because I would paint my reference photo one time and I would paint just what I saw. And over the years, I've realized that if I want to put more of my heart into my paintings, I need to dig a little deeper. And it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be difficult. I get to have a lot of fun while I do it. And I get to find the freedom of sharing who I am in my paintings. And yet whenever I start to paint, and I'm going to switch my camera over so you can see my work surface. Whenever I start to paint, I start out feeling very literal and tied to my reference photo. Let's just bring up those reference photos here. There we go. So I have two reference photos here, and this is actually, this might be a scene you've seen before. In fact, if you know the name of this place, go ahead and speak up in the chat. I'd love to hear if you can guess, or if you've been to this location. It is Canadian, and I live about 6 hours away from this, one of the most iconic landmarks in Canada. So you may have seen it on a calendar or on a postcard, but I got to visit this area a couple of years ago. And so these are reference photos are from my travels there, which I really enjoyed getting that first person perspective, because then I get to bring my own feelings and memories into the painting as I paint. And if you haven't guessed already, this is Malign Lake in Jasper National Park, Alberta. It is this little island. It actually isn't an island. This perspective shows us this little peninsula, but it's called Spirit Island, and it's very iconic for this part of Canada. So we get to paint that today. And I know that I've painted this scene before, and I needed to decide between my two reference photos. So I'll show you how I did that. I have a couple of different, in my Etcher sketchbooks, I like to work out a lot of ideas. And so let's see if we can find my kicker, how I started off, and that is these little value studies. I just did very fast, like note taking, really. If you were writing a research paper, you might be taking untidy notes as you write your paper and do your research. Well, I'm making notes as well with my paintings. And so these little value studies were helping me to see which of these photos I should choose, which one felt right for the decisions I wanted to make. and the painting I wanted to create. So I worked with those. And I also, I think it's in this book. And, you know, sketchbooks should be your safe space. A sketchbook should be where you have all your messy, untidy ideas, your brain dump for your paintings. You don't have to show your sketchbook to anybody, and you don't have to make it perfect. There are some really ugly paintings in these sketchbooks. So here's another little visual note-taking exercise that I did. These are called notans, and they're just very simple black and white dissections, basically, of my reference photos. And looking at these two, I can try to decide which one feels more interesting and compelling to me. And that's going to help me decide which of these photos to paint. And to tell you the truth, I'm still a little undecided. One of these photos has a lot more water, but I don't like these two big
sorry to interrupt
here.
you.
Oh, yep.
Are these the reference photos that you had sent us?
No, we don't have, I haven't linked those up. I will provide reference photos for our workshop that we're doing in March.
Okay.
Okay. So these reference photos, they have different things that I like about them and dislike. This one has trees on this side, which kind of dominate. I don't know if I like that. I could crop those out and just focus on this part of the photo. This one has a lot less water, which I kind of am a little sad about. I like water and I like painting water. So I wasn't sure I was ready to decide. So I've done further sketches in my sketchbook. Here's two side by side. And these, again, quick notes done in basically one layer. You can see the colors run together, and that's okay. Just exploring my ideas. And they're quite similar in approach and in color. Here I went a little bit bolder with some of my shapes and kind of leaning toward the version of the scene with a little more water, which I think is the one we're going to end up playing with today as I paint. In this larger sketchbook, I got to explore these ideas a little bit further yet. And I think I didn't. Yeah, I have one here, unfinished painting on this side. Again, no shame. And so this was exploring this idea again. We can compare it to some of the other sketches I've done. Every time I sketch this scene quickly, I get to become a little more confident and knowledgeable about my scene. I get to identify trouble areas, and I develop some strategies that I'm going to bring with me to my finished version. This version is very wet, everything running together, and it reminded me that I like building a background foundation for my painting rather than wanting to start painting details right away. And in this one, one thing I really liked was I changed up the colors of my mountains and added a little bit of a pinky tone there, which I'm seeing in my reference photo in the rocks. So that's something I know I want to bring with me to that future painting. And I'm also experimenting with crisper lines. And when you sketch and do these quick versions, these can take about 10 minutes, maybe 20. They really bring a lot of that research into the painting process, and they free me up to be a little bit braver than I would be if I was trying to do a good version my very first try. So I would love to have these little sketches turn out to be something that I'd love to frame in my very first try, but that rarely happens. I really want to have the freedom to just paint and explore. So today I want to show you, I want to demonstrate my finished version. So I'm going to use my watercolor, my artist block here. And if I was painting just here in my studio, I am a studio painter primarily. I would often choose an even bigger piece of paper than this, but I was hoping we could get a little bit closer so you can see a few more details as I paint. So this size works really well. And just like my Etcher sketchbooks, this is 100% cotton watercolor paper. So we have a really beautiful paper that will be very receptive to flow. And I like flow. I like to let my watercolor paint really move on the page. So we're going to start by just doing a background. And I'm going to wet mostly the top of my paper. And we're going to use a wet and wet approach to kick this off. And usually I have a little box that I prop my my board on because I want to be able to have that little bit of tilt as I paint. And I don't know where my box went. I'll use this one. Just having a little bit of angle gives us the ability to have some gravity happening. And the gravity will mean any excess water, if I'm painting too wet, all that excess water will flow down to the bottom of the page rather than pooling in the middle. And I want to get that sky captured here in that first few brush strokes. Just using a big round brush. I think this is a number 12. And you should tailor the size of your brush to the size of your painting. If I'm painting really large, that can be a real challenge. But, you know, a number 8, 10, 12 is a good size for this kind of 9 by 12 size of paper. I want to put in a little bit. This is visual note taking as well. If you're starting with a wet background, I should go a little bit darker than that because when you're working with a lot of fluidity, your colors do dry a little paler than they look when they're wet. So we'll just darken that up a tiny bit. And this is a way of creating placeholders for all of the elements in your scene. So as I look at my reference photo, I look for the major shapes and I'm blocking those in at this point. So that means the shape of the mountain and the colors you want to be soft and diluted, they flow a little bit together. And that gives us that beginning foundation that we'll later place our details on. I'm going to add that beautiful glacier blue turquoise water. The blue in the water comes from what they call rock flour. As the glaciers move, this fine powder of rock is in the water and it reflects the light from the sky and the sunlight and creates that beautiful blue color that you see in so many of these glacial lakes.
Sorry, Angela, do you mind just letting us know what colors you're using right now and if the paper is either cold press or hot press?
The watercolor paper I'm using is cold press. And the colors I've used so far, I've got a cobalt teal blue, which is a beautiful turquoise. I've got a moon glow, which is kind of a smoky violet. And my sky, I mixed my own neutral for that in my palette, which is a burnt umber and a cobalt blue. And the nice thing about using a mixed gray like that is you get the opportunity to use cobalt and burnt umber in your painting later because it's already there. And that really helps your color unity. I'm going to create that little visual placeholder for my island here with a little bit of quinacridone gold and let that flow. And because I sprayed with my spray bottle at the top, you know, a lot of that water moved down, but my paper is a bit drier here. So I'm also bringing in water and softening as I go.
Angela, would it be possible just to have the reference photo showing a little bit more in the frame?
Sure, I can zoom out a bit and move this down.
Yeah, just like that would be good.
Okay, I can zoom out a tiny bit more. That should work. Okay, so notice this, because I've painted this a few times already, I also have the ability, or I've also spent time observing things like the sunlight reflecting on the water and the interesting colors in this corner of the painting. We have basically kind of almost a white where the light is reflecting, but we also have that very strong shadow of the trees from the island. We'll just kind of notate where they go with a little bit of green here. And then this kind of warm, like it's a very undefinable color down here at the very bottom. It's a really hard color to identify as the water overlaps with the land. And yeah, I've experimented with different colors in my previous versions. So I know that kind of a warm, the quinacridone gold is actually a really good option. It's a nice warm color there. At this point, everything's actually quite soft. There's a little bit of textural mark here, but otherwise everything's running together. And now is a really good time to set this aside to dry. And when we do this, you know, often with watercolor, we're in a rush. We want to get to the next step, but creating this wet and wet first layer gives me that placement of all the objects, and it gives me the opportunity to have that underpainting where everything flows together. We actually end up with fewer hard overlapping edges, and the painting becomes more unified. While I'm waiting for this to dry, then the question is, what do? I've painted for 10 minutes and I don't want to stop painting. And that's where I actually like to work on other versions of the same scene, is often an approach I'll choose. I could do another wet and wet background. Maybe I've done a version that I want to add detail to. So I move back and forth within the same topic or within a similar topic so that I can kind of keep my flow going while I'm waiting for this to dry. Now, for the benefit of our demonstration, I have a version that I painted before we started. So we're going to use that to continue our painting. And you can see that it has dried paler. Everything is quite soft and flowing together, just those few hard edges in almost the same spots. So you can see that benefit of that earlier planning is creating a consistent approach for me as well. Now, at this stage, I have to decide, and this is something I've been working through as I've done my little sketchbook sketches, is how important is the island? Is it the focal point? Is it the thing I should be spending the most amount of time on? Are the mountains more important? Is the water more important? What do I really want to emphasize in this painting? And that's a hard thing to decide, because it's not a painting that's just about one thing. But we do have, when we look at this reference photo, we do kind of take a little trip through the photo. Generally, our eyes are probably drawn first to this little finger of land and the trees on it. And that's pointing us to the mountains. The water creates a frame for that area as well. We have this glowing reflection area, which is almost mirroring what's happening in the sky. So we have this little journey that we do through the painting. And I kind of want to use that idea of the journey as my process through the painting. So if it works for looking at the painting, then maybe this is how I should approach actually painting the scene. Now, I mentioned that I didn't love these heavy trees on the side, so I'm going to try to ignore them and just pretend they're not there, but I don't want to get caught up in trying to imagine what's behind them either. So I might try to just kind of paint a narrower version of this scene. Sometimes we do that. We try to mentally edit out something, and then we have to imagine what's behind it, and that will often make our painting just a little bit weaker. I'm going to use, I think, my water. That turquoise water is kind of that dominant color in the painting. So I feel like I want to paint that first. It's the kind of the first thing that you would see if you were coming into the scene and walking across a gallery and looking at this painting. I think the water would be the first thing you're going to see. And I'm going to take off my bracelets because they're rattling. Okay, here we go. This is how artists work. We come into the studio looking all tidy, and then by the end, our hair is in a ponytail and our clothes are covered in paint. Yeah, and you know, that's just the working method. I'm also going to pull in a little bit of phthalo turquoise from my palette. It's just a beautiful counterpoint to that lighter cobalt teal, and we're just gonna. Looking at my photo right now, it shows up so much better on the camera than it does if I look directly at the photo, but I really see the mountains reflected in the landscape. It's funny how in the, as I looked at the photo so many times, I didn't notice that the reason the reflections are the shapes that they are is because the mountains are there being reflected in the water. It's so funny how we get those visual blind spots and don't notice stuff like that. And then all of a sudden there it is. And that is, again, a reason why I love painting the same scene multiple times. Every time I get new information that I get to bring into the scene. This approach as well, our very first layer, and I like that shape, I think I'm going to leave it. Our very first layer was so soft and fluid and blurry, basically. And that's how it should be. As we build up layers, it's almost like you're putting on better glasses to see more detail more clearly. And if we can hold back from rushing in with detail into our painting and build up those layers a little more slowly, often we'll find that we need less detail than we thought. And some of these really beautiful paintings that you'll see artists, watercolor artists do, they'll look really detailed, and then you get up close and you realize how they simplified. And certain objects might be a single brush stroke, and yet you look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a car, that's a tree, or whatever. That's good observation and understanding of that principle of simplification. So we have our horizon in place now, and that gives us our water, and that gives us our frame around our little island as well, which I think I'm going to just place right now with a little bit of green. And I've been using undersea green for this island here. So we're just going to put it right in this spot that I saved for it, in between the turquoises. And I don't love what this brush is doing. I think these points are too pointy. So I'm going to get a brush that is a little bit crazier. I have a large range of brushes. This one's called an extended point. And it's not the point that I love, but the way the point kind of splits like that. And that can give me more organic, natural strokes. I think that'll do it. Sometimes if I really want an organic stroke, I'll use this 59-cent brush that I bought at the hardware store. And it's really interesting how sometimes we just try too hard to control our painting, and all of our trees look like soldiers in a line. Let's put some trees over here too. And everything just looks very, very intentional. And to tell you the truth, for my style of watercolor, what I like to do with my paintings, I almost wish that I could create a painting that looked like the paint fell on the page and it turned into this beautiful scene. I really love inviting surprise into my painting and natural shapes. And so if I can create little moments of watery color that are beautiful without me orchestrating every stroke, that to me is a successful painting. This is the quinacridone gold. Actually, it's quinacridone deep gold. You can see it's got that kind of almost a burnt orange color. We're going to dilute it as we draw it down the page. And I like to put my color on a little darker than it needs to be, because then you can add some water and let it flow and bleed out onto the page. And we get some really beautiful, soft transitions. I want that underpainting of kind of warm color that's going to be under the water and reflected. And I don't feel like my shape of my island is perfect, and that's all right. We're going to not worry about it. You know, until I visited Spirit Island myself, I'd seen this scene like on calendars, I think, for probably 30 years. And I had no idea it wasn't actually an island, that it was this little peninsula. And you know, really not very spectacular. What makes this location so iconic and so famous is the way that little island, it's just an artist's dream. It perfectly frames the mountains behind it and gives us some context. So I just think that's so interesting. Okay, I'm dropping in a little bit of that blue-green just down here to give us that idea of that overlapping water. In fact, we're going to draw a color down here. I'm going to use clear water just to wet this area. And we're going to bring down a little bit of the same turquoise. It's been drying and settling here, so I have a bit of a line. But I also know that if I touch in a little turquoise here on where it's wet and overlapping, I'll still have that line, but I'll also have some overlapping flow that will give me just enough unity to pull this scene, these two parts of the painting together. A little bit of cobalt blue, just because I felt like it needed to be there. And I try to trust my instincts on those things. As I've been painting, and I should show you this a little bit closer, there's things that happen that I'm not in control of. The green of the tree has spread out on either side here. And I just wanted to point that out because very often we'll panic and we'll want to fix all that stuff right away. I kind of like to let, you know, I do try to be watchful of my painting, but I also want to let those elements, those little accidental things actually happen on the page. It gives me a little bit of that accidental beauty that I was mentioning. Okay, we're going to start drawing out our mountains here. I'm going to just start by sketching that little mountain range. I'll give you a little more view there. It was a foggy day when we visited this area. And so we have some softness. We don't have just the crisp contours of the mountains. I'm using my same sky color, by the way, that cobalt blue and burnt umber mixture to create my mountain range. And a lot of water, softening those edges. I can always build up crisper detail, and I really try to take my time and not paint with urgency, knowing that, you know, I don't have to paint all the details right now. I also try to be very suspicious of any feelings of have to. Anytime I start thinking, okay, I have to put this detail in, often that shows, first of all, an inner reluctance. There's something that I don't really like about that obligation to add those details. And that little inner reluctance can tell me things. Often we feel like in order for our painting to work, we need to be very literal. And if you spend any time looking at abstract art online or in galleries, you will realize that artists get to do whatever they want. We really do. We have the freedom to make our own magic. And so I would try to avoid those have tos. I'd much rather do the get tos. I get to do whatever I want. I get to have the freedom to make bold decisions and to break a few rules if I want to. I'm just mixing up in my palette here a little bit of Venetian red. And most of the time at this stage in the painting, the colors I've already chosen down here are the colors I'll use up here as well. I don't like adding new colors at this stage of the painting, but I really liked in my sketchbook the pinky red that I had chosen for my mountains in a couple of those sketches. And so I want to use that same pinky red, and that's my Venetian red. Venetian red's really interesting because I'll show you, it goes down on the paper really dark. It's like a terracotta color. It looks darker than that even on the screen. But as it flows and dilutes, it becomes this beautiful peachy pink that's just really soft and gorgeous. So we're going to let those dark, warm colors stay there. And I need to pull a little bit of green. I like having this dark shapes. Here at the bottom, we've got the mountain, or not the mountains, the trees that come up the mountain. And as we get higher in altitude, our trees fade away. And it's actually, if you're hiking in the mountains, it's really nice to know that, because as the trees start to get smaller, you know you're almost at the top, and suddenly your hard climb will be over soon. I got to go hiking last year in the mountains, and it was so beautiful and really hard work. So just, this is the undersea green again. It's the same green I used on my trees, and so I'm holding back from painting right up against those trees. I want to leave a little gap so the island has its own identity. It doesn't blend in with the background. And we can do that by creating space here, or if they were in my photo overlapping and I felt like the greens needed to overlap, I can change the temperature of the one green, or I can change the value. And there's a beautiful cobalt blue distant kind of mountain area right here. And I think using that cobalt blue actually right in that spot is going to really bring the viewer right to that center of the page. And I'm just trying to decide how tall my mountains should be back here. Painting mountains is one of my favorite things to do. There's this beauty in a mountain range. There's a little bit of freedom to experiment because, you know, if it's not a perfect contour of that mountain, probably no one's going to bug you about it. So I do get to improvise a little bit. I guess I always like getting to improvise. And I'm going to darken up that cobalt blue again, just a little line here. Whoops. And I just blobbed. You can see it's kind of coming downward. I'm just going to draw that out and smooth that a bit. And this is where a nice round brush with a nice crisp point is so helpful if you do need to get into those detail areas or make that nice precise line. It's really nice to have a brush that comes and holds that good point. It's an important part of the arsenal. As I work in one area, the other areas are drying. Another reason not to rush is knowing that, you know, we have to give those areas time to dry. And I'm going to see if I can get a nice purple by mixing my Venetian red and my cobalt blue. I think it will make a nice violet that I can use on the mountains on this side, which don't have quite as much warm color as this side. But there's this nice little pointy mountain that I wanted to paint. And I have to decide as well, as I'm painting, every brush stroke is decision making. So as I'm painting, I'm deciding how much detail I need to add, where I need to paint next, what color I should choose. This is why watercolor can feel overwhelming when you're getting started, because there's so many decisions involved. And again, that's why I stress and why I give myself permission to paint the scene as many times as I need to before I get the version that I love. Because I know every version brings me more information that will make my painting more beautiful. It'll make each painting stronger and better. And I want that. I want to paint strong, confident paintings. I want to paint paintings that show my personality. And I have to be a little bit easy on myself that I'm not painting perfect paintings every time with every version. I like those little mountains right there. I could just keep a little painting just of those. They make me happy. And as they've gotten a little bit of detail there, you know, then it seems like other parts of the painting might need a little more detail as well. And so that drives my next decision, maybe to move back to this side. I'm going to darken up my landscape at the base of the painting one more time. And build up those richer colors. Again, with a little more undersea green. I'm just using the same color and making it a little darker. I also see a little bit of warmth along the shoreline. And I'm going to use my quinacridone gold, the same color I used down here, to pop out a little bit of that warm color. And it's placed right up against the turquoise, so that looks really pretty. I'm just drawing that across. The island itself, and I often will squint at my painting to look for where the darkest shapes are. If I squint at it, we see a lot of darks here at the trees where they meet the landscape. So let's place a little bit of those darks, build them up again.
Sorry to interrupt you, Angela.
Yep.
I'm just letting you know that you're a little over the half-hour mark.
Okay.
And
so we should be winding down.
Yeah, I'll just take this opportunity to say that I just dropped a link in the chat for her mini workshop with us coming up. The mini workshops, a couple of you were asking about them in the chat. They're basically, so the live demos are an hour long and they're free on our YouTube, and they're more of a demonstration of what the teacher can do. And then the mini workshops are an hour and a half long, and they're much more instructional, and they are $5.50 US, and you also get sent a recording of it. And with the purchase of a mini workshop, you get $10 off to spend in our store.
I hope you'll join us for the mini workshop. You can already see that I'm a natural teacher. I can't hold back from explaining why I do what I do, and I'm looking forward to in the workshop showing more of the preparatory process to get to this point of painting the scene I want to paint. So I really hope you'll join us for that. I get to share even more of what I do and why. I'm building out. I'm just gonna. I am feeling like I should wrap up and pause anyhow for this painting. It's very seldom that I'll paint on one painting for more than, say, 30 minutes, because I know that I often will lose perspective. If you've ever had a painting that's been overworked, you do the same thing. We lose perspective as we paint, and we start to just kind of forget our original intention and our direction. So I never want to get to that point. I like to stop when I feel almost done, and then come back and look at the painting with fresh eyes and explore. Just seeing it from that ability to take that time and then come back and notice maybe what I didn't notice when I was staring at the painting for a long period of time. So yeah, that's really helpful. I'm always tweaking slightly and noticing what a difference those little tweaks can make as you paint. Sometimes just darkening up one area can be really powerful and can be all you need. And often when you feel like a painting is almost done, it really just needs a very few brush strokes to be finished. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're not sure what to do, it's okay to stop and take a break. Come back and look at the painting and see what it has to tell you after you've kind of had a little brain breather from it. I'm just crisping up the shape of this mountain here. I feel like I could probably do that even more, maybe up along the top here.
Angela, I have a question for you, if you
Yes.
don't mind. One of the questions we got in the chat, they're saying, it always seems like your paper stays wet longer and you have more time to work an area than I'm experiencing with Arch's paper, for example. I'm finding it hard to blend out a sketched line.
Right. A lot of people comment on that. And yet when I've taught a workshop, sometimes it seems like people say I'm using actually less water than they think. So I've had to think about that. What am I doing that's different where I have a little more time? And one thing that I can comment on is just that I do spend time, or I should say I do almost instinctively, because I've been doing this so long. I'm always gauging how much moisture and liquid and paint should be on my brush based on how wet my painting is. So if I want to keep things moist for a long time, I bring in water as I paint. So that's a part of it. I think another thing is I'm using more pigment than a lot of people do. I'll have more paint on my brush. And I think that means the pigment's going to hold the water a bit more, and it won't dry quite as quickly. Though that's my guess. It's hard to say without actually observing what someone is doing, how they could maybe change it up slightly so they have a little more time. Also, if I'm working wet and wet, where I've wet the paper first, I always usually wet it twice. So if I spray it with my spray bottle, I might also go over it with my paintbrush, and that will give us give the water a chance to settle into the painting a little bit, and then it will dry a little more slowly as well. Now, strangely, that feels like the wrong blue. I think it is the same blue that I was using before, but I think it had a little bit of Cobalt Teal mixed in, so it looks a little more turquoise. I wanted to build up this mountain shape a bit more. I felt like the mountains I placed were a little too small. And so I'm just adjusting and then camouflaging the original mountain shape I put in because it was just a little too short. That feels better. I also increased the size of my island, bigger than what your reference photo is showing. And I like that. I think I needed it to be stronger. Sometimes we have, if you've ever taken photos of like boats on the water and then you're trying to paint the boat, once you get that photo back, the boat is usually so tiny. In order to make it your focal point, you really need to get in closer to it. And, just the limitation of what the camera can do.
Angela, another question about the water, like your paper being able to stay wet. I'm assuming it has to do with where you are in the world and humidity also, right?
Yeah, it does. But it's interesting because my climate is actually very dry. We have very little humidity, but it's cold. So there are factors there that are taking place for sure. If you're a plein air painter, and actually painting plein air is a really good way to develop good adaptability depending on the environment, because the sun will bake your paper, your paint onto the paper so quickly, the wind will dry it really quickly, and you have to learn how to compensate for those things and how to judge that moisture level. And I think it's really wise to do that. So, I would never want an artist to feel like, oh, I can't paint in my environment because it's too hot or it's too humid and things never dry. That's another problem people can have. And, you don't want to have that feeling. So I really would encourage you, just, if you're struggling with that drying time, the best cure for that is just spending more time painting, because you will get to know what your environment is capable of and how to compensate or work around some of those limitations. An artist friend of mine did a plein air painting tour in Thailand, and it was so humid there, his paper just didn't dry. And he found that it taught him a whole different working method. Rather than giving up or running to his hotel room where it was air conditioned, he had to develop strategies, and his paintings from that area have a softer feeling, but because of that extended level of moisture. So that was interesting to hear from him, how it's not that, oh, I have this limitation that's going to hold me back. I find new ways. And as artists, we get to think outside of the box and develop those strategies. Now, I feel myself fussing. Just the little bit of tweaking I was doing here was excessive. It's unnecessary for my painting. It felt aimless, and it felt like I wasn't really sure of my purpose. So now is a really good time to take a break. A couple things I'm noticing that I might later, if I come back to tweak this, and it's really hard to say because most of the time when I feel almost done, I'm actually done. And the painting will look better to me when I've come back to it after taking that brain break that I mentioned. But one thing I'm feeling is there is kind of an open space here where there's not a lot going on. These trees were too heavy, but in this reference photo, I had this little stump coming up. Maybe something like that would be a nice little counterpoint in this painting. Bringing in something from the foreground can be very, very helpful actually to creating a sense of depth. That's the reason Spirit Island is so famous, is because it creates context for the mountains in the background. And having something in the foreground can do the same thing. And suddenly we have these 3 layers of distance that are happening in the painting. So I might decide I want to come back and play with maybe putting that stump in. I could put some rocks in the shallow water here as well. I have time to think about that, and to do that, because this area is pale and light, I can continue to build detail on there. There's a couple of things in this painting I really like, and I want to point those out because this is something I do for myself. I want to encourage myself so that I come back and continue to paint. Even if this painting wasn't turning out, I would still look for little things that make me happy. There's a beautiful textured area here where the paint, I'm going to show it to you. where the paint kind of watermarked as the purple kind of flowed against this undersea green. I get this really interesting edge that makes it look like fuzzy trees. And I really like that. I love this little point of this mountain. I love that shape. And I love this little pink spot right here. So, those are little elements I really like. There's also a little bit of a glow around the point of this tree. We see the mountain, but we also see that little treetop, and that makes me happy as well. So I just want to point those out. Those are things that I would want to take with me into the next painting, regardless of whether or not I decide to frame this one. Those are, things that get added to the toolbox for the next time I paint this subject or something similar, or even for something completely different. I'll still have strategies I can continue to use in future paintings.
So wonderful.
Yeah. Now's a great time. I'm happy to answer some questions if there's some coming up.
Yeah, of course. I saved a couple from the chat. The chat was very active, so I apologize if I missed any questions. If you guys want to ask more questions, just shoot them in the chat. Just make sure that they're in all caps so I know that it's a question versus someone's comment. But yeah, I'll read out some of the questions that I saved from earlier. I actually just want to take this moment to say, earlier when I said the $10 voucher for the mini workshop, I actually think that promotion ended. Sorry about the confusion on that. If you do receive one in your email, bonus, but I actually think that promotion ended. Sorry about that. So first question, how do you choose colors that are close to your reference, or do you just come up with colors yourself?
Most of the time I'm choosing colors based on kind of what I like and what I think I see. Color is really interesting because, when I first started painting and I would look out at something that had a lot of brown in it and all I saw was brown. And over the years, my eye got more discerning maybe, or I just changed the way I looked. And suddenly I started seeing purple in my landscape a lot more. So what I saw changed based on my level of knowledge. Often what I'll do is I'll choose a foundation color. So you saw me starting with the turquoise, the cobalt teal, because that was what I saw in the water. And I keep that color in my palette because it's one of my favorites. So, I know that there are certain colors that work really well with cobalt teal. I always recommend starting with the small range of colors and getting to know them really well. So if you have a range of 12 colors, you know which colors work together really nicely. I know quinacridone gold is a really nice complement to the teal. And so that kind of drove my choices as I thought about what I wanted in my painting. And also working on those little early sketches also gave me that time to think about the colors I wanted to use and how I wanted to use them.
And then another question for you here. How do you simplify grass and tree leaves? Because I fear that if I simplify it, it won't be noticeable. Yeah,
that's a challenge because we see things with such distinction. When you have a reference photo, everything's nailed down. And so you can literally paint every brush, every grass blade that you see, but it doesn't necessarily help your painting. I like to think about that kind of that blurring that I mentioned earlier. You squint at your painting and look at the masses of shapes and paint those. Think about, progressively getting closer to your scene. If you were really far away from this reference photo, all you would see are blurred shapes and masses of color. Paint those first and then build your detail on top of that. And it's a training thing because we tend to want to rush to detail. I don't know why we do that, but it is something you can train yourself to do, to hold back and look for those masses, the relationships really between the objects.
Another one here. How do you keep track of what colors you use in that huge palette?
Well, now I have to tell you, I've used this palette for several years, so I've gotten to know pretty well what's there. And I don't use all of these colors for one painting. People look at this palette, and especially if you've been taught that you should use a limited palette, this can look really overwhelming. I worked with the same colors for probably the same 10 or 12 colors for probably 15 years before I started to expand. What I like to do is I will choose, like for this painting, these little cups actually remove. And so I will choose a selection of colors. I'll pull out the colors I use today. And you can see it's really not that broad of a range. This one I did use briefly. I think that's it. Cobalt teal. Oh, I use the phthalo turquoise as well. So I use 7 colors from this giant palette. And sometimes if the colors do look a lot the same, they're side by side in the palette, I'll pull them out as I paint so I don't accidentally grab the wrong one. But you know, it's actually not that hard once you start painting. I usually, you know, I'll pick that one starting color. This is what I started with. And then I'll pick that second color. And it just seems like over time, you know which colors work well with each other. And so it's easier to pull out that next one. And then before I go to my palette for a new color, if one of these works, why would I need to choose a new one? So that's how I use a limited palette, even though I have 60 plus colors in this big palette.
For those wondering a little bit more about the workshop, it is on, where was the date? March 17th. I'll put another link for it so you guys can click it and see the page. There will be a reference photo for it, and it is an hour and a half long.
Yeah, we're actually, for that one, we're going to take a simpler subject, because then you get, when you have a simple subject, you get this huge range of options. So we're going to have a lot of fun getting a little crazy and experimental with different approaches to getting to the heart of your painting. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
I agree. It should be very informative. A lot of people are saying they're beginners and they loved your process during this demo, and you helped explain things so clearly. So the mini workshop should be great for everybody.
Yeah, you know, in my heart, I'm not that complicated. I found that I have to keep things very simple for myself in order to make a strong painting. And so I always want to think about, how do I simplify this? And there are really only a few techniques in watercolor. It's learning how to use them and then filling your toolbox with those different strategies that work for you. And it is something anybody can do, and it's a lot of fun.
Another question about the workshop. Will you be going over more brushstroke techniques?
That's a good question. I don't know. How about I do whatever people want me to do? There's going to be a chat there too. And so I'll be really excited to answer your questions, and you know, just really kind of give you a little bit of the behind the scenes of what I had to do to get this version of this painting. We have lots of little strategies we can play with, and that includes, brush strokes and mark making. It includes choosing color. It includes working with shape and learning how to simplify. So we're going to be playing with a little bit of all of that in the time that we have. An hour and a half is not a lot of time when you're painting and trying these different strategies, but I think that we can pack it with a lot of information.
Yes, and it will be sent to you as a recording after, I think, a few days after the workshop. This demo will also be available on our YouTube channel if you guys want to watch it later in case you missed something or you didn't get a chance to paint along. Also, don't forget to tag us with #EtcherMiniWorkshop, and you'll actually be entered in a monthly draw to win $50 to spend in our store. Tag us on either Instagram or Facebook. Even if you're not painting along, just take a picture of you and the demo and tag us, and you'll be entered as well.
Yeah, I have to comment as well, like when you're doing one of these online workshops, it's so beneficial to be able to watch that recording because it's very hard to take in information and paint along at the same time. So it's really great that you guys offer that, and that ability to see it more than once. And you know, you get something new out of it every time.
Yeah, exactly. I also just dropped a link for a quick little survey about our demos. If you guys wouldn't mind filling that out, it takes maybe less than 2 minutes. It's just a quick multiple choice survey. It helps us improve content or things that we should know for future demos or workshops. If you guys wouldn't mind filling that out, I just put a link for it down below. We still have about 5-6 minutes left.
Do you want to take a look at my sketchbooks? I don't mind showing them. I've got these.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
And then if I get here, and yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, that's wonderful. And then if I get more questions, I'll just ask you as we go.
That's perfect. Okay, so I love having a variety of sketchbooks on hand. You know, sketchbooks are one thing that makes your work feel less precious. You know, sometimes when you have the 100% cotton paper and, you know, it felt like it was cost a lot of money, and so you don't want to ruin it. And so sketchbooks are a really good place to make your mistakes. And I love that Etcher has a bunch of different sizes. I've gotten to try, you know, a number of them. This one, it's because I usually paint quite large. This is one that is really nice for getting really, really simple and small with my shapes. And you can see, can you see the connection?
Yeah.
Those foundational shapes. This is how I teach myself to see those masses of shapes rather than painting every blade of grass. And it's neat how even this simplified, you know, you still start to see that the baby painting for the future version. So this one I've just started, so there's just a couple paintings in there. And then this larger size is really helpful. I love a portrait style because I paint so many landscapes. And so I had a lot of fun with this. One thing I noticed as I was painting this version, and actually for this one, I used a flat brush for a good deal of it, this guy right here. And that helped me get some of these crisper shapes. But one thing I noticed was that the blue, the gray I had mixed, it was this beautiful pinky gray in some areas, and then more of a blue gray in others. And so that got me excited about the colors I was choosing. And so that's information I get to bring to help me choose color more confidently over here. What else have I got?
Oh, we got another question.
Oh, yeah.
They love the simplicity of your beautiful, they said masses, I'm assuming like mountains and stuff.
Yeah.
Does Angela consider this painting finished? The one that you did?
Yeah, this one I just did. Well, see, that's something I have a hard time deciding, to tell you the truth right away. I feel like looking at it right now, I feel like it's not done yet. And most of the time when I finish a painting, I don't feel like it's done. I noticed that when I was teaching online classes, I would record video for those classes and I would say, we're going to come back to this painting and do some finishing touches and then it will be done. And I would walk away. And then when I would come back, my video had obligated me to come back and add finishing touches, but I would come back to see it and I would realize it looked done to me. So I started to notice that I'm not a person who can evaluate whether my painting's finished or not in that final moment. Now for this one, I feel like I might want to add, and we could probably do it right now actually, a few tiny little details just to make that the trees here in the foreground just a little bit stand out a little bit more. I'm going to try darkening the tree itself. There's two ways you can do that. You can darken your foreground object, the object in front, or you can darken the shapes behind it so that it pops forward a bit more. And it's always hard to decide which one to do. But just darkening that edge gives me a little bit of a silhouette there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Will they need a dryer or a heat gun for the workshop?
No, I don't think so. I very rarely dry my paintings with a dryer or a heat gun because I like to, I really like to let the paint do its thing. I don't get these beautiful marks over here if I'm blow drying. So no, don't plan to have a dryer or a heat gun. So even just building up a few little details there just help that island to just stand out just a little bit more. And in the moment right now, it's so easy to look at my reference photo and to start to get tied to the details in the photo. So I really want to give myself that time to step away and just let the painting be. So I'm going to do that and reserve judgment until it's done. And that sometimes can take, sometimes takes a day for me to decide whether or not my painting's done. Sometimes if I don't know what to do next, it can actually take months. And I have decided to be okay with that, to let my brain have space to process what the painting needs. It's a little exercise in creative trust, I think. And there's always a new painting I can be working on while this one is kind of percolating.
So just a quick couple more questions before it's over. Is your sketchbook 100% cotton?
Yes, these are the Etcher sketchbooks and they are 100% cotton. These ones are I believe the perfect sketchbooks. And they are I would say the paper quality is just a little bit different than the paper I buy for my large paintings, but it is 100% cotton and the flow is really nice. So I like that. I have to point out this one as well. This is the limited edition Perfect Sketchbook, and Etcher only makes these available, I think, a couple of times a year.
Once a year.
This is my, sorry?
I think it's just once a year.
Yeah, this is my favorite. When they come available, this is the one I like to grab. They're more expensive, but this is the one where I bring it with me when I travel. This was in the summer when we were traveling, doing some little plein air sketches on my own. I teach myself to paint every day, and these do have the same paper that I buy for my larger paintings. It's exactly the same. So I really like that. I love the leather cover, and these are the ones I keep in my bookshelf. It's kind of my special sketchbook. It's where I catalog my year. This is.
I love that it's an Etcher one.
Yeah, and it travels with me. These I use for studio development, so exploring the different ideas for a bigger painting, and then this one is my travel baby, where I keep my journal. So yeah, that's what I do. That's what works for me.
Do you have a recommendation size for beginners to start with a sketchbook?
That's a good question. I kind of like having a diverse, different sizes. This one might feel a little large if you're traveling, so probably around these two sizes. The little guy is just, for me, it's just a little too small to try to hold it and paint. It just feels awkward. So I like one that I can hold on my lap just a little bit. To me, that feels really nice.
And then, are there ways to create a cobalt teal out of other colors?
Cobalt teal, that's a good question. It has I would choose probably the phthalo blue or phthalo turquoise is a really nice base color to have in an artist's palette, because it can be diluted to a beautiful turquoise color. The cobalt turquoise has a little bit of white in it, I think, so it's a little bit cloudy or opaque, just a little bit. So that's the main difference between it and like a diluted phthalo blue.
Awesome. And then we're getting a couple minutes over time now, so I'm just going to ask one last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure.
What brand of paint and brushes did you use for the?
Well, I have a lot of diversity in what I use. I love trying different brands. I'm a little bit of an art supply hoarder. So my brushes are quite a few different brands. I have Princeton and Rosemary were two of the brushes I use today. And I like a Skoda as well. And I have been using the Etcher brushes. They're really nice because they have these are the ones that I would use for travel perhaps, or plein air. They have the little roll that they come in. So I've been using those, although they're being synthetic, they have a little more stiffness than I like. I like a really soft brush. And so it just, it depends on whether I'm sketching or doing more of a studio painting. And the brands of paint I've been using is quite a broad range as well. I have the Etcher travel case, or the Etcher 24 paint tin. I should show that here. And I really like this tin, by the way. It's just a great size. And these, again, really great for development pieces or plein air painting, anything that's portable, because I'm not bringing my giant palette with me anywhere. For the brands in my big palette are Daniel Smith, Schminke, Sennelier, Core, let me think, Holbein. I have a whole diverse amount. Most of what I use is Daniel Smith these days.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Angela, and thank you all for joining us. Again, my name is Brittany, and I was the studio host today with Etcher Lab. If there's any more questions, I'm so sorry we ran out of time, but that just means you should join us for the mini workshop.
Well, you should, yes. Yes, I can't wait. Look forward to seeing you there.
Amazing. Thanks again, everyone. And with that being said, join us on March 17th for Angela's mini workshop, where she will be doing another landscape, but just going into a little bit more detail with instructions.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, everybody. All right, I just ended it there. Thanks again.